The meeting held on Tuesday, December 8th, 2020, and Tuesday, December 15th, 2020, to be confirmed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General, petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business.
Government business is now the order of the day.
Order number 4, sir. In the name of the Honorable Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the lease to the Duke of Edinburgh's International Award Barbados Charity of the parcel of land, the property of the Crown, namely Lot 2, being part of the property known as Culloden Farm in the parish of St. Michael in this island, to be used as a headquarters base to house the Duke of Edinburgh's International Award Barbados Charity and to facilitate its development programs.
Honorable member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It would be remiss of me to start my presentation without first recognizing the historic nature of this debate, in fact, this sitting of Parliament today, because this is the first time ever in the history of this country that members are able to attend Parliament by Zoom, by internet, by electronic media. And this clearly will be signatory to Parliament, I would imagine, in the near future, as we continue to suffer from the ravages of a global pandemic. No one 12 months ago could have envisaged that we would be giving speeches in masks, or envisaged that there would be members sitting at home in front of a computer, but yet still able to attend this honorable chamber. And it is that backdrop that I will present to you a simple bill, a simple resolution to lease land to a charity. But the backdrop behind it and the significance of how we're having to do business and how we're having to conduct ourselves in Parliament in this modern era is something that will go down in history for years to come. And I look forward to seeing a presentation for the first time by one of those members who may be at home joining Parliament by Zoom. Mr. Speaker, this resolution is that of a lease to grant to the Duke of Edinburgh International Awards Barbados charity. That charity, Mr. Speaker, has been in Barbados for a very, very long time. Pre-independence, I'm told. 1963 is when the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme was launched in Barbados. It is charity number 214. And they do tremendous work throughout Barbados, in fact, throughout the Caribbean, I'm told. And it is essentially a self-improvement program so that people improve their leadership skills, people improve their interpersonal skills, people improve their explorative skills, and generally it is a means in which they can improve themselves and to make it seem simple to be able to get along well with other people. Because it's also a concept of people coming together and working together to achieve goals. And I understand that we in fact have members here who have been through the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, and look what that has led them to. From the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, from improving leadership to now a member of this honorable house. So obviously a good scheme, and it is something that I think we can be proud of. It's clear that those who've been through it, I unfortunately did not go through it. I was more in the cadet stream, but it is certainly something that has made a tremendous contribution to this country, and I anticipate it will continue. So it essentially will be leasing the property that was the old Prime Minister, official residence of the Prime Minister. You would recall that very excellent Errol Walton Barrow was the Prime Minister that lived at Culloden Farm. The property has now fallen into significant disrepair and dilapidation, and really cannot be used in its present state and has to be refurbished. The charity has agreed that they will put all of the money into the refurbishment. It will cost in the vicinity of $4 million to refurbish it. The lease will be for 25 years, and they will be paying about $1,200 a month to lease the land. After the 25 years, then the property reverts back to the Crown. So it is certainly an opportunity for us to be able to get what is a dilapidated building, a building that is at risk of having rodents and other health issues right there in the outskirts of Bridgetown, just right next to the National Insurance Scheme. And they have committed to us that not only will they continue the programs that they do, but with this additional amount of land and a home for the first time, to have some place that they can really call their home. They would add hydroponics to their programs, small animal husbandry, fish farming, green technology, as well as other community activities, so as to broaden the program and broaden the community involvement. This is definitely a positive for our country, because we need as many people involved in community activities as possible. You know, I've often heard people say that the volunteerism in Barbados is not what it used to be. People are not getting involved in their communities. People are not getting involved and doing community events and community activities like they should. And this opportunity for the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme to have a home is to broaden their skills, is to encourage more and more people to get back to community, get back to volunteerism, get back to being involved, help someone, learn something, and then teach it to somebody else so that they too can then expand someone else's horizon. These are the simple factors and simple basic morals and values that Barbados is built on. And this is what we need to encourage and we need to expand. So I have great pleasure, Mr. Speaker, in recommending that this Honorable House gives full support for this lease of Lot 2 at Culloden Farm to the Duke of Edinburgh's International Award Barbados charity. Lot 1, I'm told, is retained by the Crown for the use of the National Library Service. So in accordance with provisions of Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225 of the laws of Barbados, the Minister may, with the approval of Parliament, sell, lease, exchange, grant, assign, or surrender any land vested in the Crown. It is now proposed that we seek parliamentary approval of the resolution pertaining to the granting of the lease of 15,634 square meters of land, together with the buildings thereon, to the Duke of Venera International Award Barbados Charity, to be used as the headquarters to house the charity and to facilitate its development work and further expansion. The resolution has been examined by the Attorney General, and I ask that this resolution do now pass.
Honorable Leader, your opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And just briefly to contribute to the debate and the discussion and to support the aim of the resolution. Let me preface my remarks by taking a moment just to wish all members of the chamber, all elected members of the chamber, as well as ancillary staff of Parliament and the clerks of Parliament, the very best of heaven's blessings for the new year ahead. I believe initiatives like this will easily find support for some very important reasons. They certainly do find my support in this particular situation. The aim of the resolution to me is important, hugely because of the target group ultimately that comes into view. You're talking about facilitating the further development of a program that targets people in the adolescent stages or stage of their lives. For that reason, that is absolutely important, and I see it as a positive thing. Now, that is the phase of life, Mr. Speaker, as you would know, point at which we either get it wrong or get it right. Often we do get it wrong, and happily sometimes there is a point of recovery and a second chance. But many do get it right the first time around. And I think insofar as governmental policy is concerned, anything that seeks positively to create a further atmosphere that will increase and improve the chances of our young people getting it right is to be lauded and is to be supported. At that stage in our lives, Mr. Speaker, there's much potential for good. There's equally much potential for ill. Happily, you got it right all along the way. I didn't always get it right, and I thank God for second chances, so to speak. But I think that this internationally Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme and program is intended, significantly so, to contribute to the personal well-being and proper and balanced development of young people, to make them into more productive citizens of their respective countries. That program has been played out here in Barbados, and we have seen and heard of some of the results. And I heard reference made to today of persons in here who may have benefited from participating in the program. I'm not sure who they are, but the fact that the electorate thought it fit to give them that signal honor of representing their interests in this honorable house is testament to the fact that the products of the program are highly marketable in the states from which they come and are seen as persons who can at the very highest level project themselves representing the interests of their country and the interests of others. A program like this helps, I believe, with the important work of reducing the potential for costs and financial liability, which a state like us strapped for finances at all times might incur if we have to treat the problems arising in the adolescent stage of these many young people's lives, if we have to treat it post the problems that they have created for themselves and the problems that they have created for us. Program is intended, therefore, from the other side of the issue to ensure that young people are pointed in the right direction and are given the skills and the opportunity to go in that direction. And that is much preferable, sir, I am sure you would agree, than having to treat to the issue on the other side when once they've gotten themselves in the problems and they become a liability for themselves, their families, their communities, and the wider country. So we are looking to avoid that potential of the creation of cost liability attaching to some of the ills related to our youth, more youthful or younger impulses, Mr. Speaker. Of course, the important business of the avoidance of criminalization too, because not only a question of cost and liability which the state will have to face, where young people go wrong and get on the wrong side of the law, so to speak, or engage in deviant behavior. It's a question of a system which, because of its deficiencies, can tend to criminalize young people who have erred, many of them sometimes for the first time, and they've gone down the wrong path, and our system, our institutes are not sufficiently developed and sufficiently efficient that we see positive results, sufficiently so from rehabilitative efforts, but rather the other picture emerges where young people fall into the system and then become further criminalized, resulting in more deviant behavior of a more serious nature, even criminal activity. So anything we can do to help avoid that is to be lauded. And right now, as a country, we will all have to admit, and not a political statement, that we are not in a position to be efficient enough or sufficient to the problem as to properly redress it. And some of our young people come into the system, and rather than get help, they become further jeopardized and criminalized. We as a country have taken a commitment long ago that we will try to avail our young people of the very best of opportunities that a country of our level of development can afford. And perhaps sometimes we even go beyond that which we are able to comfortably afford. And we've made a commitment as a nation to these young people. Perhaps the best and most obvious example is in the area of education, free education, from nursery to tertiary. That's the business that we're into. And as a country, we have committed that. We have made a very strong avowal of our commitment to that type of policy and that type of program, that notwithstanding the challenges even now of most recent times economically, we're still bent on a course where we want to express in very tangible financial terms that commitment to our young people, that we would create for them opportunities in Barbados where they can become the best that possibly they can be, and that they can do the best which possibly they can in the interests of our wider national development. The program at its root is intended to create the values of personal self, balanced development, of balanced personal self-development, leadership skills, sense of community, volunteerism. All of these are ideals and values which as a country we have cherished for a long time. If truth be told, and if we are to be honest, we have to admit that in recent years, and recent is subject to interpretation from one person to another, but we'd have to admit that in recent years, we have seen a diminishing of the emphasis on the importance of these values of a balanced, self-developed person, volunteerism, sense of community, sense of nationalism, sense of what I call in church circles, other-mindedness, the value of leadership, and other high ideals and values which as a country we have long cherished. So programs which help towards that must find support. And here is one in which a charity being part of an international global network is giving its energies and its efforts to, and I am happy to be part of the mechanism which seeks to support that. We have to be conscious and acknowledge as well, if we're to be balanced in our view, that we run the danger of creating lofty aspirations among our young people in Barbados, only to see them crash in the valleys and sands of cynicism. And that is true. The economic situation of today, and it didn't start today, and it didn't start yesterday. Part of it is systemic, it is endemic, it is the model, the orientation of the model of economic orientation that we have pursued over many, many years. It is the legacy of a system handed down to us, we bought into, hook, line, and sinker, and have not necessarily fully made the effort to revolutionize it such that we see a change in the relationship of the majority of our people to the level of economic development in the country. In other words, we've had some development, we've had some growth, but it has been skewed. And a lot of it has been biased towards certain sectors, certain classes, and certain interests. And that has jeopardized and imperiled the interests of the majority working class people in this country. And our young people, having benefited from an education, gone through the system, and have grown up in that kind of a context where we create a sense of high expectation, of anticipation, aspiration, high hopes, but then the system is unable to deliver for various reasons, some of which I just mentioned. And those noble aspirations then come crashing down in the darkness of the valley of cynicism, in the sands of cynicism. That is part of the tragedy, the reality which we live and which we know. And anything that can help to cause our young people to escape from that kind of syndrome is worthy of being supported. 30% plus unemployment among young people in Barbados is bad. That existed even before COVID. It's certainly worse now, and the prospects going forward not as bright. Chronic underemployment in Barbados, that has been the story of the working class in Barbados. And again, it emanates from the kind of system, economic orientation that we have followed, the model that we have chosen to pursue. I have said before, and I say it only because I feel it strongly. I don't say it to target anybody here today. I say it because I feel it strongly. We have got to kind of continue to create those high ceilings for our young people, that they may have those lofty and noble aspirations. And we cannot afford ourselves to fall victim as leaders in politics and leaders in enterprise and business in Barbados, such that all we seem to do, well, I shouldn't say all we seem to do, such that we settle for offering to the young people of this country visions influenced by the low ceilings with respect to their aspirations. In other words, in simple language, it's not just to find a seasonal employment, weeding the road or cutting the grass. Somebody must do that, and that is an absolutely necessary task. And it is absolutely vital in Barbados. I've never seen Barbados this bushy in my entire life. So it's absolutely necessary now. But I'm talking about a situation where we settle for signaling to young people, this is all that we can offer. This is what you must aspire to. This is what you must expect. To wait for a seasonal job, weeding the road, cutting the bush at the behest of a politician when it suits the politician. That is not a criticism or accusation of anybody or any political party. That is part of the reality which is life in Barbados for working class people. And so anything that improves on that situation, anything that moves us up and onward and beyond that, I'm willing to support. I support this today. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, one other aspect of it to which I'm like to refer, and I ask your permission because I'm actually referring to an article which would have appeared in the media, because the reference to the land to be leased here is the Culloden Farm area. And I think this was an article under the name of Sir Henry Fraser, and he talked about our attitude towards, as Barbadians, towards our heritage and our heritage sites. He mentions the home of the Right Excellent Earl Barrow in St. Lucie.
I remember of a specific reference for it.
It is an advocate, Mr. Speaker, and Barbados Advocate, and the head of the title of the article, Things That Matter, Culloden Farm, the Garden, Other National Tragedies, and the clerks can have this to be shared, a document of the House, Mr. Speaker. And he
Intend to
mentions,
make it a document of the oath.
yes, and he makes reference to the Earl Barrow family home in St. Lucie, which is still in ruins. And he goes on to mention what he calls, I think he calls it the dirty dozen of heritage properties to which little or scant attention is paid because of the inaction of those responsible principles of government. This inaction associated with the lack of maintenance is neither new nor unusual. While the abandonment and lack of maintenance of Culloden Farm is particularly sad, dramatic, and truly tragic, it repeats a pattern all over Bridgetown. And Bridgetown is now a World Heritage Site, Mr. Speaker, I may insert. From the old eye hospital, restored 30 years ago with Canadian funds, the Empire Theatre, the old Supreme Court, the Carnegie Public Library, the St. Mary's Boys School, the Marshall Hall, Dalmeny in Pine Hill, and the old Chief Justice's house on Phillip Drive, Pine Plantation House, Erdiston House, the old Tercentenary Ward, and what I call the derelict, dirty dozen of historic Bridgetown. And of course, most recently, Glengarry Prison. So he's speaking to the fact that we have not done perhaps a good job of treating to our heritage sites, recognizing the historic significance of these sites, but also the economic value. And we are a tourist destination. And Bridgetown is now a world-recognized heritage site. But yet we have these ruins laying all around. And I think the call is clarion and clear that we need to treat to this. So I'm glad to see that some proper use is being made of some of the precincts of the old Culloden Farm. I support this, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honorary member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me say that I am the kind of person that likes to celebrate small things, and I feel that this is the occasion to celebrate that I am the first to make an intervention via this new system that we're using. I feel quite honored to be able to do so, given the realities of the pandemic that we are faced with and that we are having to manage. It means that we now need to introduce new ways of engaging with each other and with the people of Barbados, and so I'm happy to be able to do that. I rise. I guess that I say that metaphorically, but I rise, sir, to lend my voice to this resolution that seeks to see the allocation of lease arrangements or the firming up of lease arrangements with the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme for the property in question at Culloden Farm. And Mr. Speaker, I may be begging your indulgence a bit to do a little bit of storytelling this morning, because those who listen to me even a little bit will often hear me make reference to my time in the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme while I was in secondary school. It was one of the transformational activities in my life. And some time ago, almost a year ago now, when we were beginning to deal with the COVID pandemic, one of the things that I had occasion to emphasize was that even as we are dealing with emergency issues, this Barbados Labour Party administration is still focused on the business of transformation. The honourable member for St. Michael West alluded to it as well in his intervention in support of the resolution, which is to say that we can't take our eyes off the transformation project for Barbados, and this activity to give support to the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme in its role in supporting the development of young people is extremely important in that transformation. Now, the member for Christchurch East Central, in some of our discussions on this topic, made such an important point. He may not have realized it, but he made he said something that was very true and resonated with me personally, which is that for many of us, the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme was seen as the alternative to the Cadet Corps for those of us who were not so militarily minded. And he may have said it with a hint, I don't want to say of superiority because the member does not engage in such things, but he may have been suggesting that the Cadet Corps was superior in some way. But for those of us who did not see ourselves wanting, having come out of a very structured school system, to then after school hours to be part of another highly structured system. I was one of those young people, Mr. Speaker. You could not get me in another uniform after the uniform that I was compelled to wear to go to school. It just was not going to happen. I rejected brownies. I'm not saying that it is not a worthwhile endeavor. It is for some people. My two sisters were involved. I completely rejected it. I said to my mother, a one uniform is plenty for me. But there's another part of it that I don't think that we should minimize. And it's something that I feel quite strongly about. I also felt at the time as a young person, and I saw the Cadet Corps as a place, quite frankly, and I'm happy to be wrong, I'm sure I'm wrong. I saw the Cadet Corps as a place where people yelled at you. I saw the Cadet Corps as a place where their approach to discipline was one that I knew I would not respond to. And I use myself, if you will indulge me, Mr. Speaker, as a personal example. I seek to use myself as a personal example in this intervention this morning, because I think it's important to recognize the different characteristics and personalities of young people. I mean, when we say young people, it's not a single group that all behaves in the same way, as we know. And so we need to be able to structure different kinds of activities for young people. I'm the type of individual who, Mr. Speaker, who does not respond to attempts to strong arm or to demoralize or to break you in order to get you to submit. That may sound like strong language, but it's something I very much believe in. I think one of the important things about leadership is that you need to be able to recognize what will motivate the people whom you seek to lead. One of the things that we have to recognize as leaders, I don't always get it right. I'm sure my colleagues in this honorable place will agree. But one of the things that we have to challenge ourselves to do is to be able to understand what will allow you to get the best of the people that you are seeking to lead, to get the best from them. And so there's some people who may respond to, you know, the yelling of instructions and these kinds of things. I am one of those types of people who absolutely rejects it, because I feel as if when you educate a child, a person, a population, you don't seek then to shout them into submission. Your education system, I would hope, is seeking to create and establish reasonable people and reasonableness. And to the extent that you've been successful in creating or establishing reasonableness in your society, then you need to use it. Then you need to, as we would say, use your words. Then you need to be able to meet people as peers and simply communicate to them in milder terms what you would wish for them to do or what you would wish for them to do collectively. And so I would say that I was one of those young people who chose the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme because it was structured, yes, it gave goals, but it also did not seek to demoralize or to make people feel less than in the attempt to build character or to establish discipline. The Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, if I can say a little bit about it, is one where it was established at the time in an attempt to have young men, I believe it was, between the ages of 15 and 18, who perhaps were not finding structure and discipline in other places. It was created in an attempt for them to have that structure. Now, let me say that I believe that there are things, there are programs, there are buildings, there are institutions created that were created historically in other places during colonial times or post-colonial times. There are institutions that are created in the context of systems that are or were or used to be or continue to be imperialist. I think that is clear. But I think that we have to be very practical. I think that we have to understand that it is quite possible for us to see and accept the value of an institution or of a program and to claim it and to make it our own and to decide what we want to do with it and what we want it to be. It is the reason that we sit in this place today, Mr. Speaker, because this chamber was once a place that represented a certain kind of oppression that we have made sure that successive generations have sought to root out. And yet today we are able, by our very presence here, to claim it, to make it a place that we want it to be, and to structure it and to present it and to engage with it in the way that we, as Barbadians, choose, and to have it be what we want. And so I see the Duke of Edinburgh as no different, notwithstanding the origins and the fact that it referred to conferring an award from the Duke of Edinburgh to young British boys between the ages of 15 and 18. What I very much appreciated about the scheme in Barbados and in the region is that those of us who were part of it were able to make it exactly what we wanted it to be, notwithstanding for whom it was intended. I do see the value of having an award that is given at that time by the highest leader or one of the leaders in a country. At some point, I'm sure we might have the Prime Minister's Award Scheme, similarly to how we have the Prime Minister's Award for Innovation that we will soon be making active. I think it's important that young people be made visible, that we show young people that we see them, and that we are willing to acknowledge their contribution to this country. We, as I mentioned before, we may wish to do it through a Prime Minister's Award Scheme and eventually have something that is similar or that rewards some other kind of activity. It is the reason that we did the leadership badges that colleagues presented to representatives of schools at Independence Time. It is because it is very important that those in leadership engage in a country, engage in a meaningful way with young people to show that their contribution is valuable. I keep hearing that children are the future, and I always say that I reject that, because children are the present. They're living their lives now, and they're making a contribution now. So the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, sir, has 3 levels: bronze, silver, and gold. And it is really about awarding achievement. And at the time that I was a part of it, there were, I don't know if changes may have been made, but there were 3 parts of it that you had to fulfill. Expedition, like we call it at the time, which was a hike, some kind of physical activity. A skill was a second, and a service, very important, was a third. This program looks very much like others that we are a part of, similar to the the Youth Advanced Corps, although this one is not at all paramilitary in any way. It looks similar to perhaps others like the Nature Fund Ranch program, any other kind of public service or public engagement or community development program that we might know of. This one has its origins in another place, but I want us to focus on the beneficiaries and the fact that so many young people from Barbados and all over the region have been able to benefit. And so I would say that it was, for me, extremely empowering to be able to select this service. There was an old people's home in my community that at the bronze level, I selected that as my service to be able to go and engage with those young people, similarly to how some of our community health workers are going house to house, engaging with older people to make sure that they're read to make sure that they have communication and interaction. And so what I did at the time, at least at the bronze level, was to be able to go to that old people's home, I don't know, senior citizens home, better said, to engage with them and to realize really that there's somebody other than you. I mean, to kind of small up yourself and realize that you are not the most important person. You know, certainly the expedition, which is where I developed my love of hiking that I have to this day, was a place where you had to, you know, you didn't have any cell phone to call and ask somebody which way to go. You had to practice your skills of navigation. You had to be able to pitch a tent, which to this day can still do in under 5 minutes. You had to be able to cook on an open fire. And what was the point of that? That you're not always going to be comfortable. Sometimes life will be inconvenient, as we are seeing now. And it is not always that a situation can be created for you where you will be able to operate in complete comfort without any kind of discomfort or inconvenience. Sometimes life will be rough. In the Duke of Edinburgh, when you were on hike, if you did not cook, you did not eat. If your fire didn't catch, you better hope one of the other groups would share some of what they cooked. None of it tasted good, sir. It is very hard to make gourmet meals on an open flame. But the point is that it didn't have to taste good. All you needed was some calories to make sure that when you break camp at 5 o'clock the next day, that you could take up your backpack, which had to be of a certain weight, and that you could carry on the expedition. The other thing it taught, sir, was that you had to bring people along. And so a group, if it were comprised of 5, 6, or 7 people, you only passed at each level. You only satisfy the requirements to get the award if everybody finished. And that was, except in cases where there were medical emergencies. So there was a moment where a friend of mine, who is one of my best friends to this day, you know, had to put one of our other group members on his back going up a mountain, because we knew that it doesn't matter the fact that the rest of the 5 of us finished climbing that mountain, it wouldn't have mattered, because if we had left the quote unquote weakest among us at the bottom of that hill, we were no better off. And that's the lesson that it taught at the time. I want to come, sir, to the issue of the current Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme and to reflect on how the institution operated when I was a part of it. The institution had assessors and evaluators, local people who had finished the Gold Award and who then would come back and serve the scheme to be able to assess and evaluate and to be able to go with us on expeditions and so on. Now, when you complete the Gold Award and you become an assessor or evaluator, then you have a responsibility to plan expeditions with young people. You have a responsibility to have meetings. You know, you can't just go up in St. John and start walking. You have to plot a route. You have to plan. If you're going overseas, you have to have meetings. You have to do fundraising. And at the time, it was very difficult because the scheme did not really have a home that we could all go to and make these plans and engage with young people. And so the reason that this resolution is important is that it provides the scheme with a home. We don't want our young people just showing up anywhere and meeting anywhere. We need to give them a certain sense of security. We want to make sure that the scheme is properly institutionalized so that where meetings have to take place, where activities have to happen, that they have a home. Not only that, that if there's a person who wants to be a part of it and they know where it is headquartered, it may then be possible for them to make contact and to suggest that they want to be a part of it. One of the shortcomings I felt of the scheme at that time, sir, was that those schools that had already had very built-in structures and were well organized for extracurricular activities of this nature had high levels of representation. And those schools that perhaps did not have the history in the scheme and so on, they did not have groups. So it meant that some students from other schools had to come and join our group. Regrettably, it meant that some of the older secondary schools, like Harrison College and Queens College, others, had very strong representation, and some of the others did not. But I will tell you, sir, that one of my many pleasures with being in Duke, as we called it, was that I was able to meet people from other schools through that program. There was a young woman who joined us from another school. I will tell you that none of us wanted her to leave our group because some of the skills that she brought, some of the perspectives that she brought, because of the kinds of other activities that she was engaged in, were so beneficial, and there were skills that none of us had, because in our curriculum at our school we weren't doing those things. And so to me, this resolution allows other students to be able to, who would ordinarily not have access, to be able to be a part of the program. That's very important, because we have to make sure that these kinds of activities are available to all and that no one is marginalized from being a part of this. In my closing, sir, I want to say something briefly about the idea of heritage preservation. The Honourable Member for St. Michael West made reference to it, and it is critical. Now, we as government have talked a lot about the importance of partnerships, and the fact that while we may not always be the ones that are able to invest in the restoration of historic properties and so on, that there are partners who are willing to make that co-investment with us. And so it is very encouraging to note that what is contemplated as part of this initiative is the restoration of the property at Culloden Farm by the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme. It is no small investment. They are aware that they will have to comply with the heritage guidelines for the restoration of the property, and they have agreed so to do. But it suggests, and perhaps it is an encouraging note on which to start, that I can so fully agree with the member for St. Michael West, an encouraging note on which to start this 2021. But I think it is important that we not lose sight of that mandate, that while we must develop, while we must continue to invest in the physical and other development of the country, including and especially Bridgetown, that we do want to preserve some of those parts of our heritage that make Barbados interesting and unique. Now, there's a whole other conversation to be had about the extent to which we also want ourselves to reclaim some of those spaces and to reflect some of our original heritage from whence we came. That is a conversation perhaps for another day. But I think that is important to make visible the fact that these kinds of partnerships also allow us to draw in other resources from other places to be able to fulfill our commitment to heritage preservation. So, sir, I want to close by saying that I fully support this resolution. I think that the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme is one of those institutions, like the Pinelands Creative Workshop, like the Israel Level Foundation, like Dance National Afrique, as it was called at the time when I used to have on my dancing shoes, like so many other community organizations, that while it may not have originated with us, I think that those of us who've been a part of it for so many years have been able to make it our own and have very much enjoyed being able to do that and being able to make sure that our young people benefit. And so with those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honorable member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, as a proud member of the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme during my school days, it would probably be remiss of me not to offer a few words in these chambers. Mr. Speaker, a lot of very good organizations come up in Barbados, but their longevity is hardly guaranteed. Now, if I tell you that I was in Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme when I was 17 years old, that would give you an idea. And the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme was here for quite a few years before I got involved. That would give you an idea of how long it has been around. But it is always a challenge, Mr. Speaker, for philanthropic and community-minded bodies to sustain themselves. And I reflect on the fact, sir, that very few of them enjoy enough support to reach the point where they can have a headquarters. When I joined the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme as a lad, it was being administered by Richard Goddard. I think everybody of a certain vintage would know who Richard Goddard is, I hope, as opposed to being was. I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know. He still is. I'm happy that he's in essay, as the Latins would say. But you know, when I asked Marcia about Richard Goddard, sorry, the honorable member who just spoke about Richard Goddard, she had absolutely no idea who he was. And in those early days, the scheme was administered from the veranda of the Goddard family home at Fontebelle, which was on the premises of Goddard Supermarket. And when we in the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme had to have meetings, senior meetings were held in the living room of the Goddard family, and group meetings were held on the veranda. A lot of organizations, sir, are desperately in need of their own housing, of their own headquarters, so as to be adequately able to satisfy the demanding needs of today's beneficiaries. Mr. Speaker, I suppose some would argue that the fact that we thrived on the veranda of the Goddard family would mean that we don't need to have a home. But the starry-eyed, enthusiastic young men and women of the 70s and 80s are very different to today's young men and women. I don't think my son or daughter would go anywhere unless that place had Wi-Fi. In fact, sir, as a family, when we go to visit other people, my son, who is a little bit more rabid of a IT person than my daughter, his first question is not who we going at or why we going, whose birthday is it. His first question is, they got Wi-Fi. That is his priority. And as an organization like the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme is forced to stay in touch with and be compatible and meet the needs of perhaps in many ways a more intelligent, aggressive, and worldly viewing client class, it becomes important for them to be able to satisfy the need for a permanent headquarters that can cater to those things. I was also a member of the Boy Scouts. And one of the things that allowed the Boy Scouts of Barbados to thrive, and in fact, I can say that I was a member of First Barbados, Commonwealth School Scout Troop. One of the things that allowed the scouting organization to thrive was precisely because it had its own headquarters at Hazelwood. It had a home. It had a home where the band could practice. It had a home where its business could be satisfactorily administered. It had a home where young men could camp. It had a home where scout troops that did not have a place to meet and have their own activity, it had a home that could be offered to those entities, sir. It isn't every organization that will benefit from the largesse of the crown, I suppose, and by crown I mean the crown in England and not the crown that we talk about here, not the local crown. It isn't every organization that will have that backing, that support, but to the extent that it does, and to the extent, sir, that resources are available to support an organization that has done a tremendous work for Barbadian young men and women, the government of Barbados would do well to match those efforts. And if, sir, in matching those efforts, it requires us to make a contribution of a piece of real estate, historic though it might be, a piece of real estate that is lay idle, then it is the least that we can contribute, sir. If you measured the value to our young men and women of the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme, you would find, I believe, that our contribution is far smaller in real terms than the good that the scheme does for Barbados. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we have recognized over the years, but increasingly so, is the importance of having wholesome alternative activity for our teenagers, for our young men and women. And as Attorney General, sir, I believe that I perhaps see it more often than others. But the harsh reality that we face is that our young men and women are urgently in need of intervention of a positive kind, such that it would steer them away from the negative side of society. Where there is a void, that void is going to be filled, Mr. Speaker. Where there is no leadership offered in our homes or in our communities, then there are rapacious individuals out there who are anxious to fill that void. Where a young man or a young woman grows up without the role models that they need, there's going to be some fella on the block who is more than happy to step in and to become the role model. Plain and simple. And if, as a government, we can support organizations in a more meaningful way, organizations, yes, like the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, and yes, like the Boy Scouts and the Girl Guides and others, then, sir, as a government, we are contributing in a tangible way to making sure that those voids, if they exist, are filled by wholesome activity and role models that will point our children in the right direction. For me, this is a no-brainer. This is a no-brainer, sir. The government of Barbados spends millions of dollars putting up community centers that are often empty. We spend millions of dollars putting up pavilions that have been allowed to fall to ruin. We spend millions of dollars putting hard courts and lights that don't get used as they should. And in part, sir, because we end up providing the physical space, but as an administration or as a public service, we are not really geared to adding in those those softer things. Perhaps I'm not making myself clear, sir. You see, we will build a pavilion for a community, but unless there are people in that community trying to get our young boys to start playing cricket or to start doing things, it just becomes an empty edifice that will wither and wear and be worn away by the ravages of time. You see, no government gets our young people interested in cricket or football. That's not what, I hope I'm making myself clear. It isn't that government doesn't have a role to play in sports. But as a little boy, sir, there was no outreach officer or nobody from the government department who used to come out and tell us, all right, boys, here's a ball, going to play cricket. We make cricket balls out of wet newspaper and black tape. That ain't come from no Ministry of Community Development or from the Ministry of Sports. So what I'm trying to suggest, sir, is wherever the government can put physical things in place, we must. But equally important are those underlying things that make this space have value. I've seen too many community centers empty. I've seen too many playing fields with grass growing on them almost a foot tall. And yes, in St. Joseph. In St. Joseph. Because all the things that the government will do will often relate to nothing more than putting in the infrastructure. What is needed, sir, are those things that it's hard to find a way to spend money on. You can't spend money on leadership. You can't spend money on enthusiasm. You can't spend money on those things that cause young people to want to gather. You ain't capable of spending money on that. So that has to come from a different level. And in the Duke of Edinburgh Ward scheme, sir, those, as a young man, those things, that softer side, was inculcated in me as a young man, and it was inculcated in the honourable member who just spoke, and in many of us. So, sir, bottom line, before I take my seat, we have put physical space at the disposal of many organizations over the years. We've put physical space at the disposal of many communities over the years. This is an opportunity for us to put just the land, because the scheme, as I understand it, will be completely renovating the building. They're going to restore the historical aspects of it, which is something that we also need to do in relation to things like the Carnegie Library and others. So they're going to be making an investment that perhaps if we had the physical, if we had the actual resources, we should be doing. So this is an opportunity for us to restore an important part of our history, provide a physical space that a valuable organization can call its home, and in that process, sir, help to build our young men and women. I can think of no better value added that we could have to vesting a building in an organization than that it helps to build our young men and women. And I therefore support this resolution wholeheartedly.
Honorable Member for St. Michael East. Turn on your mic, Honorable Member.
Mr. Speaker, let me place this caveat up front. Previous discussions, I did indicate that I would not participate in this discussion. But I have listened to some sordid attempts to rationalize the irrational this morning. Sir, this party has signaled to me that there's an attempt to go on a new cultural trajectory I was very impressed by the fact that we removed the statue of Nelson. I was impressed by the fact that we demolished a massive building at the corner of Fairchild Street in order to develop a park in the main city in Barbados, in Bridgetown, as a center that represents the struggles of the 1930s. Obviously, everybody knows we have Independence Square. I thought we were on a journey of consistency without any ideological encumbrances that would affect the smooth thinking of what it is we're trying to achieve in terms of self-determination, of building a sovereignty, and so on. I begin to hear voices speak in a very progressive manner about our heroes. And I thought that the government would be moving towards not just that physical transformation of the city, but also symbolic representations, ideological representations of what it is we want to achieve. I don't know if I am a weirdo, and therefore it was extrapolated from this behavior, a sense of a clear vision of what it is we want to do. But I am a little confused at this point, and probably is a common part of my attributes to be a little confused at times. Probably is a curse. But this Duke of Edinburgh International Award and the placing of this Duke of Edinburgh title, because Prince Philip is the founding father of this institution. But I am now going to pass by a building that represents the founded father, our founded father of independence, not their founded father of any Duke of Edinburgh award. Our founded father of independence, a black man in 1966, who lived in this house in Culloden Farm, and would have held many meetings in that house about making sure we slice the fabric of colonialism. I would love to see the minutes. And this same founded father of this institution, who people are speaking so nobly about, and who is now responsible for imparting all the great endowments that Jesus could not impart to them. This institution, that person's had the opportunity to be part of. All of a sudden, there are no sacrosanct, because not what their mother taught them or their fathers taught them. Maybe you get up in the morning, make sure you clean your teeth and comb your hair, boys, and make sure the girls got their hair plait well and come out, and talk with deportment and decency and all these important virtues of life. But they are what they are because they were part of this institution as a rationalization for why we must accept this. This is over 15,000 square meters of property. In my view, it's a historic site. Should be representative of who we are. Not Prince Philip. Not Prince Philip. They have had so many different institutions in life that impart positive values. But at this stage, when we are on this path, you would tend to believe that we'll be grounded in something, that we believe in something. How could you not contemplate an alternative site to preserve this building in remembrance of Errol Walton Barrow. It was not his personal house, but the state provided that house for him. And he was breaking the back of the same colonial masters that this man, who is the founding father of this institution, represented. Wonder what he would have been saying in 1950s, when he established this institution. What he would have been saying. You don't believe that a more refined thought from black working class intellectuals ought to be put in this before this matter comes before the House of Assembly? I was only reserved this morning because I know I'm outnumbered. If there's 6,000 in here, I know that I'm the only one that likes to say these things. And I don't want to go down history as an insane man in Parliament. But I know this is not right. But I know that I do not have the power to turn this back. And I twist and turn and looked up in the ceiling all around here to tell myself, could you breach a commitment which you give? Because I like to know that if I give you a commitment. But after hearing that, I had all the intention of deferring any views which I have until when the government achieved what it wants to achieve. But I have to ask other persons in this society if we are going to allow these things to just flow through this society. We are not trying to highlight consistently the contribution of our own people to society. I've been hearing about community centers not being used. Community centers are not used because the administrators of these community centers will not allow the people in the community to take charge of the community centers. And when the people in the community comes home on evening, the officers in the public services closing the community centers and can't get access to it. I'm surprised to hear him say that. That is known. So it's not the lack of the ability or the passion of the community in participating in these exercises. I'm hearing other views about having a place, a central location, because this is an old model of what constitutes a well-formed institution itself, that an organization that emerged from out of affluent groundings. All of a sudden, the state that's struggling in these days believes that it has a responsibility now to rescue that institution, to continue to do all the work that's been done. I've known many institutions that contributed to the development of young black Barbadian children. When that institution was born, where were we? When they talk about the young people of the day, where were we? Were we in the equation at the time? Who were these young people, what they looked like, and who they were at the specific time? Don't talk to me about people with these generic views about people this and young people this. 1950s, where were we? Listen to the discussions of 1966. Listen to the discussions in the early 1950s. Where were we? So don't tell me that we have to facilitate them. It can't be motivated by that. We have arms of government that must be very clear, and I know that where I am, there are times when I'm going to see these things because there are people who are seasoned, and they're going to perpetuate this nonsense in the political culture of Barbados. They're going to continue it. I just want to register my voice on this matter because I don't want it to be said that I am responsible for addressing some of the inequities in Barbados. And I'm seeing something like this happen, that Barrow will turn in his grave 3,000 times in the morning when he get up and you see a sign saying the Duke of Edinburgh with an international, I don't know this kind of pretty language, international award and all of that on a building that once was the building that the founding father of our independence lived in, slept in, kept meetings in, and we did not allow the Ministry of Culture or allow any of the other departments of government to use that building. I don't even know how much it's going to use for what I say, it's going to use a part of it for a museum or a library or something. But 15,000 square meters is a reflection of a specific mindset, sir, that feel comfortable doing these things. Just move, Nelson. But now would allow these same people to come back and have possession. You don't mind the leasehold. Don't mind the leasehold. When people hold on to land, wherever people hold on to land across the universe, it is always an issue. But it seems not to be an issue here. It seems not to be an issue here. Wherever people hold on to land. When the Mormon so-called group that was degraded to the point that they call them the Mormon gang struggle in Kenya, a country that we're now trying to establish a good relationship with. It was about their land. If somebody owns land, possesses land, living on the land illegally, the reality is that the land is in their hands at present and you've got to struggle to get it back. 20 years. 20 years they will hold possession of this land. Look, I don't want to get down to the individual aspect of this individual man, you know. Because this man, through a union, is part of royalty. Through a union, he is part of royalty. But his contribution to mankind is not as wholesome as you all think that it is. It is because elitist intellectuals in a Eurocentric society, especially in Britain, and the BBC, always treat him with special gloves. Rather than ripping off the face of the monster, they will always talk about him in a very subtle way because of the kind of remarks that he makes. Not only about black people, but about people all across the world. But he was held in a secondary role within England. I don't mind how much philanthropic attitudes you see, how much money he gives or how much gifts he gives. I always watch people who give gifts because sometimes the most demonic individuals in society are the people who give gifts. There are some people who hold some level of remorse and will give because they feel guilty of the wrong that they have done. And we call that reparations, even though they don't think that is reparations. But we are in a sad state. And while some people talk about all the different authors and intellectuals and people who influence their life, I talk about this because I'm influenced not by those people. I am influenced by what Garvey says, the philosophies and opinion of Marcus Garvey. I raised first by Tony Martin. These are the things that influence my thinking on these issues. And the problem is that many people know the truth, but they don't like to say it in here because they believe that these mahogany desks, a lot of lights surround them. Unfortunately, they're not downtown. Lots of people never believe it is Parliament, you know. Because parliaments don't look like this. This is an alternative in the interim period. But everybody want to get back to what they call the real Parliament. There's a special mindset a level of damage that has occurred. And the reality is that, unfortunately, today, the reason why they don't want to get into this because they don't want the spin, and they want the spin in it because they don't believe it's the appropriate time. As I belong to an institution, it's the appropriate time for me to express my views in this manner about this. But so I can help doing different. We are now talking about moving from where we are. Not only where Barrow was in 1966, but we are now talking about moving from where we are. People call it a sovereign state. Some people believe it's not as sovereign as it should be because we have a Governor General who is a surrogate of the Queen of England. We are now saying that we're going to do something so fundamentally different to create a new political configuration this year in the form of a Republican form of government, which requires public discourse and probably internal discourse as well. And we want a Republican form of government because we don't want to hold the symbol of a Governor General as representative of the Queen of England. The hard facts, people don't like to hear it. I don't even like to talk about it. But this is where you're going. So you're signaling one thing to the people, and you seem to be on a different track. And many people in here are in conflict in their conscience. They don't want to say it. They are in conflict with their conscience about what it is. You don't know nothing about anything. They're in conflict with their conscience on where are we really going. So I'm not surprised to hear some voice say, not me. That's the level of the profound nature of the ignorance that exists. I'm saying that these matters, sir, I am not tied up. The Prime Minister has a weapon that she can use. But I am not tied up in the collective responsibility. So I can say I'm not, and I can change my mind halfway in the speech and say I am going. The very opposite, the very sorry. Because I tell you how I feel. I am no lucky. I am no lucky. No salary. No status. I tell you how I feel, and I am in here because this is how I feel, and I like to believe that I represent not just me. I represent at least a constituency, a national constituency itself of people who feel the same way as I feel. I'm only a messenger in the circumstances. Just passing through. And that somebody could say this thing today, Tuesday, and then next Tuesday, somebody might be coming to my front if they so desire. But I don't really care if you come or not. I don't care if what is my name, can't the truth bury me. I don't care if I don't care what none of so. Right? These are things that are not right. And just because you are in a position of power, you can't do it to all of us who came in here as a consequence of the support of the masses of people who represent true democracy. That is where you got problems because Trump just like the same Jew. That's where you got problems in the States now. I went down here debating it. But Trump gets 70-something million votes. So I got to say something about that society. I won't let people to talk the same thing about Barbados. I won't let people to talk the same about our House of Assembly. And regardless of whether you like it or not, the margins was relatively narrow in terms of if you talk about millions. It says something, the truth has to be told. The truth has to be told. Something is wrong. And I believe that if we are at this point in our history at present, and we get the impression based on things that we're seeing happening, and then all of a sudden you see that, like if somebody spit in the road in a vehicle and turn and go in the opposite direction. People become confused. People begin to doubt you. And if 1,000 people are orchestrated in such a way to express a view in order to address these wrongs and to make people believe that it is not You can't justify it. You've got an intelligent population. You cannot justify it. You have to fight, and you have to do something that resonates and impact on the society that is even greater than the wrong that you actually have committed in order to continue in the credibility of the people of Barbados. And I really feel, sir, that if I didn't speak on this, that this would be a betrayal of the trust that my brothers and sisters put in me. And I consulted with him. I said, this would be a betrayal of trust. If I was in a stronger position, I would ask that this matter be deferred. I prefer you to defer this until whoever you give the commitment to, that on reflection, you believe there are a number of considerations. If you read the history, not of the bourgeois intellectual, if you read the history of the founding father of this, you will best be able to appreciate why they want to preserve the symbol of the founding father of Barbados independence. Why you want to preserve that? The things that this man said in a very subtle way to people not only of the black race. You don't even have to read a textbook now. You Google and you got everything coming out here. How could we sit down and plan this and then attempt to justify the behavior of the colonial masters and help to perpetuate an institution that is a reflection of that same behavior from all back in the 1950s. But then you're going to suppress the image of an institution that represents the founded father of Barbados independence. That is what I would like to ask the people who are the major people in the forefront and the advocacy of whatever it is that they're trying to sell to people who they believe got malleable minds in the society itself. You're not taking people serious. You're not taking people serious. You got too many secondary schools and too many tertiary institutions to ignore the concerns of the people of Barbados, and you have to put it right now, or not you will suffer the consequences later for having it wrong. And that's all I'm saying. So I only want to say a few words to you and say, but probably the demons inside of me agitated, and I had to respond. The reality, sir, is that this is a wrong. Records of history prove that this is a wrong. And if we can't move it, no, it still has to be moved. We have to take all kinds of action to constantly deal with these issues. It is not going to die today based on any vote in this House of Assembly. But this matter has to come up. I will feel very strong, and if I had the authority to indict people, they would be indicted too, sir, for this wrong. They deserve some kind of punishment, not just asking for trying to resolve the issue itself. This resolution, it ought to be a resolution that should be deferred. But I know that I can't defer it as a one voice. But it is a bad signal. And this is a clear case of who we truly are if we allow something like this to continue to pass through our House of Assembly. Thank you very much for entertaining me, standing as a representative of St. Michael's East in these circumstances, sir.
Honorable Member Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I too want to add my voice and rise virtually to participate in this debate for this resolution this morning. I reflect on some of the words of the contribution of the previous member who participated, and it is clear that his passion remains strong. However, I just wish to put on the record that this government has been involved in a process, sir, where we are seeking to ensure that all of our young people, but certainly our population, that we provide the broadest range of opportunities, sir, with respect to being able to participate, not just in our democracy, but certainly in order to ensure that we can change the mindset, if you like, create a new national consciousness with respect to who we are in a real sense and how we will participate in this global community. Now, that being said, sir, the matter at hand, depending on one's perspective, and I want to make it clear that the government's role and actions in relation to this specific resolution, I fully support. Because the expansion, sir, of extracurricular activities for our young people is precisely that which creates an atmosphere for grooming leadership. And we have come to office, and as you are aware, sir, we have introduced those leadership badges which we gave out on Independence Day. And to the extent that we know, in a real sense, throughout our educational system, ensure that we can provide as much opportunity for young people in this country to be involved as early as possible in figuring out how do we motivate each other as citizens, how do we create the space where we understand and listen to each other's perspectives, I think is a worthy endeavor. And to the extent that this is just but one element through which we can do that, I fully support. As the honorable member for St. Michael's South Central intimated, I was a cadet, sir, a proud cadet, and that notwithstanding, that obviously the number 3 cadet company remains the number 1 cadet company in the country, but that is a subject for another discussion. I think it is important to recognize that the landscape with respect to extracurricular activities, I think, in the country has evolved, and we need to ensure that we have an ecosystem with respect to the support of the formal curriculum that allows our young people to flourish and to be very confident about who they are and what aspirations they can realistically look forward to, and push beyond any perceived boundaries that may potentially exist as barriers for their development. And I want to indicate that once I was a cadet, and I did not become a member of the scheme, I was involved, sir, as a schoolboy in the Key Club. I was involved in the environmental club. I was an athlete, sir, at school. But as well as I participated in the cadet band, which in a real sense, sir, was separate and distinct from just being a cadet. And the reality is that that represented for me personally a full slate of a range of activities that allowed me not just to understand how people are motivated, but in a real sense to get into the communities and to be involved and immersed in different aspects of what it means to be a citizen, I think. And that was my particular path. And when the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme came along with respect to what it was offering in addition to what it was doing already, I recognized that I was already, through my participation in this suite of different extracurricular activities, that in a sense I was already doing some of the basic tenets of what the program offers. And obviously time management is critical with respect to what one does at school, and I think that equally is important. And if the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, like any other extracurricular activity, can create an atmosphere where young people can be exposed, at least in a single program, to some aspects of leadership and the building of teamwork, I think that's something that I fully support as someone who has come up in an environment where the culture that we have created, sir, within the context, as I know it as a schoolboy coming up through school, that how you expose young people, sir, to being able to take responsibility for not just their own individual actions, but certainly with respect to how do you take charge of a situation? How do you motivate people to be able to move from one direction to another? I think it's absolutely important for young people to recognize that in a global environment, that it requires consistent leadership, and that the school really is the place, sir, where one can be exposed to the fundamental or the basic avenues for training to be able to become effective leaders in adulthood. Because you would recognize, sir, that we have had some challenges in this country over the last few years, and we continue to be faced, I think, with some of those challenges simply because we haven't had avenues where we have a real expansion of extracurricular activities which allows young people the space to, one, learn, to make mistakes, and to be able then to emerge from that as much more confident people. And to the extent that we know as Barbadians, we always like to have the meeting after the meeting where we don't discuss issues in a confrontational way. I think those are that is one of the aspects that I would dearly love for us to be able to change. But the only way we can do it responsibly is to create the atmosphere, I believe, sir, where we allow our young people the best possible opportunities to be able to do that. Now, that may mean Juvenile Award Scheme for some people. It may mean cadets for others. It may mean Girl Guides, Boy Scouts. And you have a range, sir, of extracurricular activities that takes place within our school system that allows for that. And the more of that we can have our young people participating in after 3 o'clock at school, sir, I believe is absolutely critical for the future development of this country. And I fully support, sir, any opportunity where we can further scale up the opportunities for young people to be able to learn about themselves, their communities, the persons that we have to interact with, certainly as Barbadians first, but equally to recognize that there are people with different perspectives. And I listened very carefully to the member for St. Michael East, and he shares a completely different perspective than I do. But by the same token, we will not allow ourselves to descend to the level that which we are witnessing currently in the United States. And therefore, I want to give the people of this country and the young people that this Barbados Labour Party government will not in any way, shape, or form, sir, allow any discussion to be able to tear at the very fabric of the nature of the society. Because our commitment certainly is to ensure that first and foremost, that once we accept that we have to navigate a national development process, which is tricky with respect to how we choose to engage the world, we do so as Barbadians, and that we will not allow any perceived any perceptions that are externally driven, sir, to drive our mandate internally. Because the fear of watching what you see, sir, on the various news networks across the United States, or some of the injustices that you see externally, and don't get me wrong, sir, they are real. We have families in the diaspora, sir, who experience on a daily basis many of the injustices that we witness. But, sir, we do not have to take on in the same visceral way that others do, that same type of approach with respect to how we as Barbados seek to treat to those issues. So once I hear the member from St. Michael East very, very clearly with respect to how he sees this particular resolution in that context, I don't share the same fear or concern in the same way that he may wish to express them. But as Barbadians, sir, as a young person who has come through a framework of engaging not just in formal education, but equally, sir, different forms of extracurricular activities, that we need to instill in our young people very clearly that whatever positions we may or may not hold on any particular subject, that we are Barbadians, and that we do not take for granted, certainly as government, I certainly don't take for granted as a private citizen, that any democracy obviously has to be carefully guarded. We see the signs of it very clearly playing out across the world. And as Barbados, we will continue to chart a path, sir, that empowers our young people to recognize differences where they exist, but that we always have the capacity, sir, to sit down and work through whatever the substantive differences may be. And that is all the more reason, sir, why any program that exposes as early as possible our young people in a responsible way, clearly, sir, to global issues, but issues in terms of how we will craft solutions from a Barbadian perspective, that we have given a commitment, sir, that we want our citizens to be global citizens, but rooted in Bajan values, sir, that any exposure that we can give to our young people to engage responsibly and to be aware that Barbados' story is extraordinary, but we do not take it for granted, and therefore we will not allow ourselves to descend into any open warfare, as we see certainly in last week in the U.S. Capitol, and therefore to the extent that as members of Parliament, we continue to engage with all of our constituents across Barbados to ensure that the issues and the matters that obviously are of import to them that the government is seeking to address, but we seek to address them in a way, sir, that is as progressive as we can to do that, given the current context in which we find ourselves. And the reality is, sir, that is important to understand, because when we look at what Barbados, with respect to where we are at the moment, is intended to move, part of how do we respond, given, and the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central raised it tangentially, the reality is that Bridgetown, and to a large degree, we have a large number of facilities across Barbados which have fallen into disrepair. They are not being used, sir, in the most productive way. And right now, the scheme is currently housed in a back office in Sheraton Mall with little or no visibility. And the reality is, sir, that we have to bridge the gap between how we regenerate activities, certainly within urban Barbados, and to the extent that we can allow that to happen, whilst at the same time, sir, having an expanded program across our school system for young boys and girls to be able to be exposed to a range of activities. I believe that this government has a responsibility to be able to facilitate. And I think that if we can understand or help our citizens to understand that our path to not just development, but certainly providing opportunities, expanded opportunities for Barbadians, goes beyond just what the government may spend from a fiscal perspective, but equally in working with civil society in order to ensure that we can continue to provide opportunities and to provide hope for all of our citizens, given what we are seeing, sir, taking place in a global environment. Now, it's perhaps even more important in my mind that even in the COVID environment, that especially in the COVID environment, I should say, sir, that this is a matter that we have to ensure happens, because whilst I accept that it still presents a public health threat, my fear is that this COVID environment has thwarted those opportunities for extracurricular activities, which are so critical, sir, to the education system, that it is a subject, sir, that has not necessarily had as much attention because we've been focusing on the public health pandemic and wanting to get children back to school. But extracurricular activities, sir, I believe is perhaps even more important than the formal side of education, because that helps to create the kind of citizen that we want to be able to take charge of this country in 15, 20 years. And I believe, sir, that we have to be very careful. And I take this opportunity, sir, to ask Barbadians again to continue to follow those public health protocols so that we can get back to as close to normal as possible, because the extracurricular activity, sir, that takes place at school, I can say to you, without a shadow of a doubt, forms a critical part of what our system offers by way of education for our young people. And I support this resolution because I believe firmly, sir, that those opportunities that we can provide for our young people post 3 o'clock during school days or on weekends when they're actively engaged in whichever curricular activity they're involved in, which is expanded, that is the very thing now that is perhaps missing with respect to this. Obviously, given the COVID-19 pandemic is clearly missing, but I don't want to have a situation where going forward, that side of it is thwarted much further. The reality of it is this is a particularly challenging time for us to be able to respond to on a whole host of fronts. And I want to give certainly my support to the resolution from that perspective, and to stress to all parents and to all the stakeholders who, not just as it relates to this particular extracurricular activity, but to ask parents to relook how they are currently looking at there seems to be a lessons epidemic, sir, that has exploded across the school system, which has taken away some of the time that students would ordinarily engage in extracurricular activities. And I believe that if we want to create global citizens with Barbadian roots and Barbadian values, that we have to find a medium whereby we can allow our students to have more relevant participation in extracurricular activities, because I believe that over the long term, that will redound to the benefit of the country, because we will be able to invest in ensuring that at that very critical age, 15 to 18, that our young people would have the greatest possible exposure, sir, with respect to being able to learn about the country, being able to practice the art of leadership and how to motivate people long before, sir, they get into the formal workplace and into adulthood, whereby those decisions now actually have real consequences in the context of being able to help either move their communities, it will guide their career path, and it will certainly guide, sir, I think, the development of the country with respect to being able to ensure that we provide as sound our education as we can with respect to our young people. So I fully support, sir, this resolution, but let me reiterate to the honorable member for St. Michael East that this government certainly will not descend into or allow the country to descend into any type of divisive manner in which we are seeing expressed outside of Barbados. And we must be mindful that what we watch on television, we do not necessarily bring into a Barbadian context where it really has no real place. And to the extent that we have to engage our citizens within the context of the diaspora in terms of helping us to craft a citizen that is not going to become as cynical as those which we see expressed across the world now, that as Barbados, we will continue, sir, to chart a path that is relevant to continue our path to development. So let me thank you very much, sir, for making this contribution virtually, and I certainly give this resolution my full support. Thank you very much.
Honorable Member St. James South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very happy to be able to join the discussion today, looking at the issue of the resolution for the provision of for the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, being able to use the property at Culloden Farm. I'll share with you why I think it is important, and that what we're doing today is so critical in terms of what we can do for young people going forward. I want to support what would have been shared by the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, St. Michael South Central, and Member for St. Joseph, because my own experience has taught me absolute importance of those tertiary socializing institutions to a country. Culloden Farm, Mr. Speaker, was a Georgian villa that was built by a colonial back here in Barbados in 1789. And that colonial was able to display the grandeur of his home, was able to display his wealth, and to enjoy facilities that they could not even begin to touch. Certainly would not have had the opportunity to enter and to participate and enjoy the beautiful surroundings. Our past leader, Errol Walton Barrow, the first Prime Minister of Barbados, was a man who was very deliberate, a man who understood the absolute importance of symbolism, the importance of helping Barbadians to understand that they are as good as anyone in the world, and to do things that help Barbadians to understand that we are rising. And in so doing, he selected Culloden Farm as the place that he was going to make the residence of the first Prime Minister of Barbados, showing that we were taking over from a colonial period, and now we are into self-governance, and we can occupy any space that is available to us, any space in Barbados, and to be able to rule and govern ourselves well. I well remember as a teenager listening to the elders around me discussing and talking about politics. And one of the things that would come up was the level of hospitality that the Honourable Errol Walton Barrow used to engage in at Culloden Farm, making it a welcoming place for Barbadians to come, for intellectuals to come and discuss politics, for ordinary people to come and enjoy socializing with their Prime Minister. And so this symbolism became important in building a sense of dignity, in building a sense of our independence, where Barbados was going to. Over the years, it fell into disrepair, terrible disrepair. It was allowed to deteriorate, and successive governments, B and D, just simply did nothing about this first residence of the first Prime Minister of Barbados, and it was indeed a very sorry state. The amount of money it would have taken to be able to restore that Georgian villa and allow that Georgian villa to be able to play a role in impacting on the ordinary Barbadian. This means that we would have to do something deliberate for another generation of Barbadians to be able to continue and pick back up from where Errol Walton Barrow left off. And so today, what we're doing is by leasing the property to the Duke of Edinburgh scheme, which is going to be renovated based on the Maria Holder Trust being able to provide the millions of dollars that it would need to be able to take and convert this into a useful building that can now impact hundreds of Barbadian young people. I think this is a good thing. I know it is a good thing. And Errol Walton Barrow would salute this. The Duke of Edinburgh Award is a scheme that I did not have the privilege to be a part of, but I always heard of it, and I've always interacted with any number of people who were connected with it. I myself would have been a Girl Guide, and therefore I knew and understood the absolute importance of young people, children, having the opportunity to be a part of these types of community outreach programs that help to build them, that help to complete the process. While at home, you will be given certain instructions and grooming and so on. Every child not always have the privilege of being able to be exposed to all the things that would make them successful. And therefore, the role of clubs and groups was to help finish the work of grooming and preparing a young person for the world. And indeed, that is the motto of the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme. It is there to be able to make people ready for the world. Now, the Duke of Edinburgh Award has done a lot, not just here in Barbados, but across the world. More than 1 million young people in 140 different countries have had the opportunity to be a part of their program. And what this has done, it has literally sprinkled across many villages, cities, town leadership. And here in Barbados, we have done extremely well with the award. What we've been able to do, approximately 250 young people are included in the program every year. Between 2007 and 2017, close to 2,500 young people were able to be part of that scheme. At the moment, they have an explosion because they have close to 420 young people now in this current crop. And what this says to me is that not only is it growing numerically, but by putting out more and more leaders, more and more leaders are available to help give the training and the support and the coaching that is necessary for our young people to help them to develop the skills that make them ready for the world. Now, this is something that is very dear to my heart because in studying sociology, one of the things that I read when they were looking at how do you advance the development of your society is the role of the tertiary level socializing institution. That home and school were just steps 1 and 2. But to complete the work coming out from school was this tertiary level socializing institution, whether it was Girl Guides or sorority house, or whether it's Duke of Edinburgh or Junior Achievement, that this tertiary level socializing institution was critical for any society that wanted to build a strong economy and a strong society, because it completes the work. Now, what is the benefit that the Duke of Edinburgh Award has given to Barbados and to our young people? For our young people, it's helped them to build self-esteem, it's helped them to build their self-confidence, and it has helped them to understand the importance of team and cooperation and determination. And you would have heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central sharing what she got from out of the experience and what it did for her. I can endorse that because the number of Duke of Edinburgh Award persons that I have encountered all demonstrate a certain set of qualities. And they have given themselves one that is remarkable and repeated among them is the issue of service. And there's one thing that Barbados has in general with the service. This is how you're going to build strong leadership, and this is how you will build strong families, strong communities. So it has done a lot of good for young people, but in addition to being able to build self-esteem and confidence, just being able to state internationally that you are part of the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme, it made you a part of a grouping that gave you a higher level of acceptance as you move through the world. Certainly as a person who's done a lot of recruitment, I know that a lot of HR recruiters look to see what types of organizations a person has belonged to. And they have been able to use this to be able to, what are some of the values, what are some of the behaviors that they can expect to experience from this particular person if they were to hire them. And so it has done a great deal of good to young people by giving them that extra boost when it comes to getting employment. Now, in terms of Barbados, it has helped us to rebuild the fabric of our society and to be able to integrate more of the norms and keep young people within the general stream of Barbados. One of the things that was mentioned by the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, and I want to echo it because I think sometimes people don't understand the danger society is in if you do not have enough of those organizations, clubs and groups, etc., to keep young people engaged and keep reinforcing the values and behaviors that are important for keeping the society strong, keeping the society connected, and keeping the society anchored to a common vision. And therefore, this Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, yes, it is pursuing a program that flows from another place, but it also forms part of what we are seeking to do here in Barbados. If you look at what the government's program has been in relation to how are we going to rebuild and strengthen the social fabric of Barbados, how are we going to reach out to our youth and empower them, how are we going to prepare them to engage in a youth economy, it would have to start with looking at ways to gather them, train them, mentor them, support them, and then enable them to be able to pursue a path of development that will take them where their dreams are. And what is it we've done as a government? Well, we've had the Youth Advance Corps. We have already in the society people like the Israel Lovell Foundation. You have things like the Junior Achievement. You also have a number of other groups like the 4-H clubs. You have church groups, youth groups, Pathfinder, a whole slew of them that are currently working to try to help us rebuild. But what is one of the issues they experience? Being able to find new leaders who will be able to carry on the work of the institution. This is the problem that we found with the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, being able to find those persons who will be able to give the leadership and the mentoring that our young people need, especially in this time. And the interesting thing about the Duke of Edinburgh Award, it doesn't just groom the young person, it grooms them for leadership. And therefore, our other institutions will be able to find leaders from among them to help them to be able to keep the fabric of our society. And so I want to congratulate them on the work that they have done. What the other element that has been of concern to me, sir, not just globalization, but the whole issue of the online world. And when we first started the community technology programs in which our people at the community levels were able to go to the centers and learn how to use technology and learn how to do online things, one of the things that I really wanted to see is how are we going to help them to be able to use the access to online platforms well, because you can go in there and engage in anything. And one of the things that I have noted is that as more and more people, young and old, have engaged on these various platforms, that they can disappear into a world of their own in which they're really not engaging much else outside of that particular world. And therefore, what is happening, in other words, that is now the new neighborhood. The neighborhood is not necessarily the people who live immediately around you, and this is what is breaking down. In the online world, therefore, the challenge that societies would have is what are our young people being exposed to? What information are they being given? What filters are there to help them to make good selections and good choices? They disappear into a world where they are being taught that which may be inimical to the future of the country, inimical to their own futures. And this is a very present danger that the online world can present. Wonderful as it is, powerful as it is, unless people enter that world with sound values, sound personal vision, without those, it will be difficult for them to navigate and not find themselves victims of the online world. And we don't have to look far to see what is the impact of when people are engaging a particular group who seek to brainwash them into seeing the world from a particular perspective. And then you get this terrible explosion then in the society as they seek then either to impose their will or react to what they consider to be negative and seeking to correct that wrong. You don't have to look far to see where that has happened. Therefore, any society that wants to be able to provide for the people the opportunity to be well informed, and to have a set of values and behaviors that help them to make excellent choices, it is very important that you have these community level organizations that help to shape their minds and thinking and give them the protections as they engage the digital world. So today, as we are seeking to pass this resolution to make available Culloden Farm to empower the Duke of Edinburgh Ward to continue to work with our young people, indeed to give a new generation of young Barbadians to be able to work and operate within a space that was once colonial, but now will be their own. I want to congratulate the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, and I thank you very much for bringing this to fruition, because I think this will help to accelerate the work of the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme to produce even more and more benefit for Barbados. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the privilege of being able to share on this very important resolution for the benefit of Barbados and a new generation of young Barbadians. I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was not aware, certainly this morning, that this resolution, a simple one, seeking to give permission to the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme to have possession of a property for lease, would have generated so much discussion and so much debate. But in a way, I'm glad, Mr. Speaker, that it has, because it has given us the opportunity to, in a sense, start to peel back the skin of the onion that resides very much in this country and certainly across the world. And I say peel back the skin of the onion because, you know, when you start to peel back the skin of the onion, there are many layers, and you start to discover that there are some things underneath the skin that you don't like what is looking back at you. Mr. Speaker, we have to have a Barbados when we finish coming through this pandemic. And I start there because I feel sometimes like, despite all of the work that members of the subcommittee, the cabinet subcommittee, are doing in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, all of the things that, the big picture things that we've been trying to accomplish as a people, to be able to stay the course, to be able to make sure that our institutions do not fall apart, to make sure that we can maintain the social fabric of our society after this pandemic, that there are some amongst us from time to time that are hell-bent on not being able to see the long-term vision, sir. I am in a House of Assembly, a place which, I guess if you are on the outside, you may not fully understand all the rules, the regulations, and all the things that happen here. I'm in a place where, I remember when we were in Bridgetown, I used to often comment that when I looked at the stained glass windows, the representation of the people on the windows were not of people who looked like me. But I appreciated the struggle to have allowed people of color to be able to make their way into the halls of Parliament, and certainly to be in a position to have also been able to grace the walls of Parliament and be part of a legacy through my father of someone who has served the people of this country in a modern day Barbados, sir. I question those things about the stained glass ceilings and the stained glass windows. And I questioned it, but I also dismissed it because I also understood that, having been educated, I was able to make the distinction between the fact that we had a history of which we may not always be proud of, but at the same time that, having been given the opportunity through education to be able to also travel and to understand how society works, how the world works, that I also was in a position to be part of the transformational change. Now, many of you may appreciate that there was a time when I had long dreadlocks prior to my medical issues. Just like you, Mr. Speaker, I was one of the first persons to get called to the bar as an attorney. I perhaps was one of those people who went against the grain, given my, my background. But I knew who I was, and I will always know who I am. But at the same time, I also understand that there has to be a Barbados when we finish this process and we come out of this pandemic. It therefore means, sir, that resolutions such as this and all of the others where we have looked as a government at structures that have been allowed to languish for several years, both administrations, they have been allowed to languish. That we have a responsibility to the people of this country, and in particular to the future of this country, to do a few things, sir. The first thing we have to do is we have to ask ourselves whether we have the money to be able to go after all of the properties that have been identified by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, to be able to repair every single structure because they are part of our heritage. That's the first thing we have to do. If we can't find the money, sir, for one reason or the other, because the tourists ain't coming, because we haven't generated enough monies in the economy, because of all of the global factors that are facing the Barbados economy, we then have a responsibility to figure out where else do we look? Where else do we turn? It doesn't mean that we don't understand our heritage when we enter into negotiations with entities. But what it means is that there must be a Barbados at the end of this process. And in so doing, sir, when we looked as a government, and certainly the Ministry of Finance, both of the members, the ministers who operate out of the Ministry of Finance have spoken and alluded to this issue. When they would have looked as a team as to the state of play in Barbados, we recognized a few things. We have buildings that have been there for several decades that are rich in heritage, but at the end of the day, we ain't got no money. And we can't basically have the buildings remain in a dilapidated state because it doesn't look good in terms of the heritage that it represents, but it also does not look good on us as a society, that we have options available to us to allow ourselves to partner with other persons, but at the same time, we are doing nothing to ensure that we get those properties up and running again. So that's the first consideration. The second consideration, sir, has to be the purpose for which the applications are made in respect of this type of investment. So we are not willy-nilly about decision-making in relation to the historical significance of buildings that people might want to erect structures on, sir. We pay attention as a government to the purpose for which people step forward and say that they would want to be able to have an opportunity to lease lands in this country to be able to assist the development of this small island. So whether you have the Maria Holder Trust entering into arrangements with the Barbados government over the last couple of years, building out nursery schools in this country for Barbadian children, poor black Barbadian children, middle-class Barbadian children, sir, I am sure if you look through the lineage of a lot of the donors in this country, they are going all the way back to the United Kingdom and to the monarchy in the United Kingdom, sir. But we as a people, because of who we are, we understand that even irrespective of our history or the history of the persons who come to our shores and want to give back to us, that we understand that we live in a modern day Barbados and there must be a Barbados after we have long gone. And for that reason, sir, we don't take these things lightly. I also, like my colleagues, have been a product of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards scheme, and I understand it was no elitist club. It was like, I went to Harrison College or Queen's College, as many would want to jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, it was for the big boys and the big girls, sir. I'm a product of the foundation school and a proud product of the Christchurch Foundation School. And sir, for me, it is not a case of which school had it and which school didn't, sir. It is a case of there must be a Barbados when we come out of this pandemic, and we must prepare ourselves working with people who have been on the grind, working with other Barbadians who have been working in service to make sure that young people got something to do. That when we come out of this, with all the impacts that are there for us in relation to our young people now who are going through the separation from the school environment, that we got something in the next couple of years that has been built out by an entity that has demonstrated that they have a track record in this country to be able to help us as a community to build out and create opportunities for our young people, sir. That's what this resolution is about. And it pains me, sir, that, you know, we are a wonderful party, you know, because we take in everybody. This is the beauty about the Barbados Labour Party. We take everybody. Because we are enriched as a party because we have people with divergent views. It is what allows us sometimes to press the pause button and to say, wait, hold on, we might be going a little off track, but we need to get back on track. We don't condemn people for having a difference of opinion, sir. We allow them to come into Parliament and share their opinions. And there have been many instances where many of us have sat here in awe and recognition at the same time of the differences in our society, because that is what makes us who we are, that we don't silence anybody from saying what they feel. But I will not sit in a Parliament, having been through all that I've been through, and allow the impression to go out there that this resolution is about a misdirection on this administration. I will not sit here, sir, and allow a misrepresentation to be put out there that thought has not been gone into the ideology behind this, or even the direction for what we must do as a country to make sure that we not only preserve our history, but we also ensure that we partner with people who can help to accelerate the cause a little faster. Sir, I have serious concerns about where education will be in the next couple of years. Concerns because, sometimes it feels as though every time you're getting ready to hit off again, something happens in terms of this pandemic and you have to change direction. And daily, we are trying to figure out how do we make sure that when children can return to school, there are activities that will allow us to be able to engage those children. How do we look at the school day and make sure that we have extensions of the school day, that we have extracurricular activities? How do we make sure that we prepare ourselves for that transition back to a full face-to-face environment, sir? And we've started those discussions, and I'm glad that we have the foresight to be able to look at entities like this, to be able to partner with them to ensure that they can build out something that no doubt gives them a headquarters, but also will give us something back in return across the landscape of education in this country, sir. And, I don't hold a brief for nobody. I never will. I have not done so in my entire political career, but I know right and wrong. And I know that we have a number of entities in this country who have gone above the call of duty. I don't care what color they are. I don't care what shape they come in. I know who I am, and I know that my leader understands, and the Cabinet of Barbados understands who they are as well. And when we make decisions in the name of the people of this country, sir, we do so with the best interest of the people of this country at any point in time. Now, I'm not going to get into no debate about how long the building sat there and where were all the critics and the pundits and all the observers while the building was allowed to languish. I'm not going to go there, sir. I'm not going to go to a place where within my own constituency, the late Errol Walton Barra has a park in his name. And for many years, the park has not even been developed. The park sometimes is not clean. I'm not going to go there. But I say those things to make the point that if we're going to fight for one thing, we got to fight for everything. We can't be selective in what we fight for. We have to make sure as a parliament, as black people in this parliament, that we send a message out there to investors, to anybody who has an interest in this country, that we have a history and a heritage to protect. But at the same time, what we cannot do is sit down and behave as though we have all these great options. Because we don't as a small economy. And therefore, we must find a balance in every single thing that we do because we recognize that we are a small economy. Yes, we punch above our weight, but there are certain realities that we must face. We want vaccines from the rest of the world to be able to make sure that our people can get back to work. Where we can get them from? The same people who connected to the monarchy? So do we dismiss and pull down and degrade and dismiss people because of their history? Or do we say, look, we know our history. We know what you've done. We know what your forefathers have done. But we draw the line in the sand because these are the things that we need to do in order to make sure that we move forward as a society. So it doesn't mean that when we negotiate, we forget our past. It doesn't mean that because we allow any charity in this country to be able to have lands vested in it to develop things for the people of this country, that we have lost our minds and we've lost our way. What it means is that we understand the economic implications and the social implications that will result from doing nothing. From sitting down year after year and saying, oh, we haven't locked down this and we haven't renamed this, as opposed to sitting down systematically and looking at economic investment, looking at the social impact of what is happening in our society, and taking hard decisions. And I get it that some people can't see what is around the corner. I get it that some people can only see what is in the past. You must know your past, yes, in order to know your future. And there are some of us who understand and are steeped in the historical knowledge of who we are as a people and what we have been through, but are not prepared to allow that to be like a noose around our necks. We ain't prepared to be lynched on the trees on the plantation. We are prepared to take the knowledge and to negotiate and to put things in place to be able to make Barbados a better place for us and for future generations, sir. We have to make sure that things like the Barbados Youth Advance Corps, which the Barbados Labour Party put in place when it came in, that we can speak to those things instead of running from them. Because the last administration didn't look at the fact that we had young people out there who had nowhere to go, nothing to do. They talk all over the face, but they did not put the programs in place. This is a party that has allocated at least 20 million to put into that program and to continue to put into that program. This is a party that can stand proudly and speak about the national heroes and all the things that it has done in relation to even the papers on the removal of Lord Nelson, sir. I'm not going to run from my history in the Barbados Labour Party. I'm not going to sit here and allow anybody to distort the history of this party that has made so much achievements in relation to our heritage. Sir, I am passionate about this because I believe that we have a lot to do in terms of building out this society over the course of the next few months and the next few years. The only thing I would like to see happen faster in relation to this resolution is that the people can start to break ground tomorrow so that when we're able to go back into a face-to-face environment, we have the systems up and running, sir. And I would like to see that we have more organizations coming forward where government can partner with the third sector to be able to give them opportunities to take the bull by the horns and run with it. That's what we need. Within education, we have set up a committee to be able to embrace people who are interested in running after school and after care programs, sir, even before school starts. And why? Because as other members have said, we are in a situation where a lot of those programs would have had to come to an end as a result of the pandemic. We have a situation where a lot of our young people are simply just going to school, they're going to lessons, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central said. And we are in a situation where they are not doing things to learn anything else beyond sitting down on a device when the day comes, sir. If it means that we have to look at an extension of the school day to ensure that we have a rigid set of activities planned for young people, then that is what we must do. And if it is the things that I grew up in, junior achievement, Duke of Edinburgh, or as you have nowadays, things like the Fun Ranch, or whether you have the Brewster's Trust running football programs, we need to include those things and not try to resist the very things that give support to our internal systems. And I agree with the Honourable Member for St. Michael East on one point that he made about the fact of our community centres, and that our community centres could be utilised more for the benefit of communities. But that is something that we will continue to address. And I know that the Minister is working on plans to ensure that these facilities can work almost around the clock, because we all were, as we're sitting here as members of the current government, we were all disadvantaged in our communities by people who did not appreciate that the very institutions that were in the communities were not servicing the people in the communities in which they live. And therefore, we are working on getting to that point. It may not happen fast enough for the Honourable Member for St. Michael East. It may not sometimes happen fast enough for me. But I know we are working on it. And I know that our mission is the same as when we started. It is the same as it is today as it was when we embarked on this journey, sir. We may have had a lot of stumbling blocks along the way as it relates to the economic challenges, but our focus is still the same. We have even agreed at Cabinet, and I believe the Honourable Member for the Honorable Minister of Housing would have indicated to this chamber that we have been looking at all of the abandoned buildings as well under the crown. So this is not a program where we're just talking about buildings that we want to give to organizations that are connected to the monarchy. We are talking about a systematic plan to be able to look at the things that will allow us to have economic investment, the things that will allow us to be able to get community programs going that we do not have the funds to do, the things that will allow the Ministry of Housing to be able to look at all of the lands that it has to see how we can encourage investment. And perhaps the most burning one for me is to make sure that we get housing over the course of the next few years, because that, for me and certainly the member for St. Michael East and others, is a major issue for us in our communities. So it's not a one-sided approach to this thing, sir. And I get that as we talk about discussions about reparations and our history and our heritage, that these things sound catchy, that we want to jump on the bandwagon and put a position that allows people to feel as though we are doing something wrong. But I want to tell this country, this administration is doing nothing wrong. This resolution is about protecting what we have, but at the same time being able to build out the future, sir. I have been approached by entities like the Achieve Foundation. We've had the Prince's Trust. We've had all kinds of entities come. We've had even entities established in Barbados coming to the Ministry of Education and requesting of us to partner to be able to help to do things. But I want to tell the country this. We don't just say, oh, come set up your structure and run with the program. No, we sit down and we say, what are you doing? How is it going to benefit our young people? And if they come with something that does not make sense, this minister tells them, go back and come again. They may come and they want to do something for secondary. My priority is primary. Find me a program that can fix that, sir. That is me. And I know that is the case of many of my colleagues as well, sir. Because we don't just take what they bring, because we understand the history as well. We want what we want for who we want, and we must do so in a respectful way. But I'm not going to stand here and, sir, and pretend as though we don't need the assistance from outside, because we must get assistance from outside. We must get assistance internally as well. And as I started, I want to end, because I want Barbadians to understand there must be a Barbados when we come out of this pandemic. So all of the things that seem ideal right now in terms of talking about two Barbadoses and all those things, there was always two Barbadoses. Even in trying to remove the common entrance, if there is no greater understanding of a two Barbadoses, it is in dealing with education and dealing with the 11+ examination. That is when you see the animal comes out of people in relation to a change in an examination. So nobody can come and tell me now that we suddenly have a new way of doing things, or we don't like this set of people. We have become who we are, because while we are fighting to gain our independence and to make sure that we create our own identity, we also share a space with people who don't look like us. I remember going to a function with the Prime Minister with the Sandy Lane Trust, and her remarking to them that she don't know how we would have gotten to be able to have so many opportunities for people who could not afford medical attention in this country if it wasn't for charities like that. Indeed, sir, we also find ourselves in a situation where if for the last couple of months we didn't get assistance in terms of the voucher subsidy from the Sandy Lane Trust, many of us would not have been able to support families across this country. Sir, I am no hypocrite. I am not going to stand here and say thank you in one breath and then cut down the very people who have genuinely been assisting us in this country. People who probably got lineage back to the same monarchy. But I don't care, because they have made Barbados their home. They have basically assisted Barbadians, all of us in this chamber, all of us across this country who have benefited from it, sir. And therefore, I ask this country, I ask this chamber to endorse this resolution, not for any other reason than that this is who we are as a people, this is who we are as a government, sir. And with that, I am obliged.
Honorary Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Lower Chamber, and members who are virtually in Parliament. And thank you for the opportunity for saying a few words, Mr. Speaker, on this resolution to lease a parcel of land for the Duke of Edinburgh International Award. Mr. Speaker, I sat and I listened to every contribution this morning, and it would be remiss of me as the Minister of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment not to say a few words and to be brief. It is only yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and members of the chamber, those virtually and not virtually, that I met with officers in the ministry, carving out plans and strategies that lies acutely with our responsibility of creating and implementing programs with a view to build stronger communities and well-rounded young citizens through the empowerment and full involvement of youth and communities, both in social and economic development of this country. And Mr. Speaker, while doing that, the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme was mentioned. And research indicates that the subvention from the ministry to the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme started back in 1995. That is when the Ministry of Youth was created. And Mr. Speaker, this Duke of Edinburgh International Award is a global framework for non-formal education and learning as stated by most members, especially by the member for Christchurch East Central. And this program challenges young people to discover their potential and find their purpose, their passion and place in the world. And Mr. Speaker, I heard the honorable member for St. Michael Southeast, who mentioned clearly the whole aspect of citizens being the responsibility of government, and government can't do everything by themselves. And the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme, it is one of the programs that offers young Barbadians between the ages, I know it has expanded from between the ages of 14 to 24 years, the opportunity to earn 3 levels of award. But more importantly, the awards are achieved by regular activity in voluntary service, skills, physical, recreation, and adventurous journey. Presently, Mr. Speaker, I heard the member for St. James South quoting figures, but in 2019, 44 persons completed bronze, silver, and gold awards and in this country. And the most recent statistics show some 354 active participants spread across all aspects of the organization that offer the award. And Mr. Speaker, when we speak about building global citizens, I have to support my colleagues. This is one of the programs among many other programs offered by the Ministry of Youth that seeks to build global citizens. And I often use the phrase that national development, youth development is national development, and national development is youth development. We're at a stage, Mr. Speaker, where our young people are indeed challenged. We have unemployment. Some will argue unemployment among the youth is at 40%. That is debatable. But it certainly is a high number, and it certainly is over 30%. And Mr. Speaker, what these programs like the Duke of Edinburgh Award programs do is offer lifelong skills for our young people that we can leave these shores. And also, if we don't leave these shores, we can enter organizations and display leadership, have the spirit of volunteerism, have high self-esteem, operate with a passion with what we do, and to be honest and upright citizens. And I can't sit here, Mr. Speaker, as Minister responsible for youth, and allow this debate to occur without making the point that we have some over 6 young people in this country presently. School leavers amount to some 4,000 persons leave school every year. And our programs, as we execute, and our fiscal challenges does not allow us to find all the money to cater to all 60 young people. And while we have started the Youth Advance Corps, that take in over 900 at-risk youth annually, then I heard the member for St. Michael Southeast mention the Nature Farm Ranch, which is very close behind. That is not a governmental entity. At least 600 young people pass through that program. So we have to embrace the third sector, the non-governmental organizations that seek to give our young people the opportunity to become global citizens and seek to give this government the opportunity to make Barbados the best place that young people can work, raise a family, do business, and as we say, a place of good vibes. So I am here, Mr. Speaker, supporting this resolution. I am not at all focusing on the whole aspect of removing of Nelson, which I supported, and where the Duke and Edinburgh came from, where the Duke came from, and the Prince came from. Because at the end of the day, a true statement was made by the member for St. Michaelis. We have to prepare Barbados for 50 years down the road. I don't know if I'll be here. 50 years from now, I'll be 101. I would love to live that long. To see my son take his rightful place in this country as a youth at age 13. So we have to be mindful of the statements that we make. And while the member for St. Michael East is my friend, and while the member for St. Michael West is also my friend, this debate is about providing a space so that we can continue to develop and build up the programs to empower our many young people. What is our biggest challenge in this country? Our biggest challenge in this country, Mr. Speaker, is deviant behavior among our young people. And how do we solve it? We focus all our attention on the police force. They need assistance. And they need assistance before the crimes are committed. We need to change behaviors among our young people. And how do we do that? With programs offered like the Duke and Edinburgh Awards. And we have to get into our communities. And Mr. Speaker, some comments were made earlier. Some I agreed with, but some I do not agree with. Because I see a fundamental role for community centers to play in this country. And if we're talking about creating the scale where more young people can enter non-formal educational programs, the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute, we visited as a ministry. I was part of that team. And it was clearly agreed upon that we have to utilize our community centers as satellite stations. Only this morning, I received a message from Minister Cynthia Ford. We're on the same wavelength, Minister Ford. The member for St. Thomas, sorry, Mr. Speaker. And we have to understand that if we sit and if we continue to what I call fight among the minor, as opposed to focusing on the major issue at hand and what we have to do to really position this country 50 years down the road, then debates like this would degenerate into where this body came from and why this building was left unattended and why we shouldn't touch it. I am not going there this morning, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, sorry. My focus is on letting Barbados know that the responsibility of this Ministry of the Youth. We focus on youth leadership. Presently, we have a program that will cater to some 120 young Barbadians across the country, from St. Lucie, from up north back to down south, from St. Lucie to Christchurch and St. Philip. 120 young people will be training in terms of youth leaders in this country. We have a major community program that we execute annually. And part of that program is to identify leaders within our communities and provide the necessary training and counseling and mentorship that they too can pass on to their peers, because peer mentorship is very fundamental among the youth. We know very well that a young man will want to listen to his peer more than you want to listen to, say, the member for St. George South, which is myself. Because at our age, we seek to tell the young people what we went through. But what those young mentors are doing is seeking to inculcate the way in which you can become more positive. You can be influenced in a manner by your peer, whereby you too can add value to yourself, to your family, and to this country. So the Ministry of Youth will embark on a major youth engagement campaign. We also will embark on a major anti-violence campaign. Currently, we have someone within our ministry working with us to go into our communities to address this matter with a view to change behaviors. We are not going to send people into the police to say lock them up. We are going to have meaningful discussions with the young people of this country on the blocks. There are leaders on the blocks as well. And I don't subscribe to the notion that we don't have leaders on the blocks, because those block leaders are very influential leaders and they're not all negative. So we have to shift our mindset on how we can engage 3 out of 4 young persons or 4 to 4 young persons of every household and in every community. Shift the goalpost from 50% to 100% engagement, and to have them involved in some activity, whether formal or non-formal after-school activity, such as building self-esteem, teaching them motivational skills, learning them leadership. And we as a government, we don't have the resources to do it alone. So we welcome the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme. We welcome the Princess Trust. We welcome the Boosters Trust. We welcome Murray Holder. We welcome all of these associations who would add value to the next steps training initiatives that we have, that we seek to focus on some 350 young people. The summer camp program, the cultural programs that we call Youth Achieving Results, performing arts programs, visual arts programs. These are the programs being offered by the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment. And we know the time has passed where our community centers will be closed day by day. Since coming to office, we have seen the increased use of community centers for various programs, whether it's sporting program, it's cultural programs. And we have focused our attention on having these community centers open not only to 4 o'clock, but to 11 o'clock. And our goodly Prime Minister, the member for St. Michael East, I'm not at all tracking with respect to the Prime Minister's constituency, but nonetheless, the good Prime Minister, she would like our community centers to be open 24 hours. And I welcome that as well, but we will get there. We are not doing it by baby steps, because the mission to have our community centers open till 11 o'clock is not a baby step. And we're on track. By June this year, we will form at least 50 new youth groups or community groups across Barbados within our communities. Why? Because we need a place where our young people can positively engage their minds and do something constructive. We want to bring the blocks to the community centers. We are not telling you you can't lie on blocks, but we are telling you that you have a place that you can go to learn lifelong skills, and that is our community centers. And Mr. Speaker, if we do our research, we'll see that within most communities, we have catchment areas that can account for over 500 to 600 young people between the ages of 7 and 35. So what do we do? Should we ignore the Duke of Edinburgh Award? Should we ignore the Brewster's Trust? Should we ignore those persons who want to come to Barbados to set up sports academies? We have to embrace them in order to save this nation and in order to build global citizens and to provide opportunities for our young people. So, Mr. Speaker, like I said, I'll be brief. And I want to thank the member for Christchurch West for bringing this resolution. And while some may think it should not have sparked so much discussion, I am happy just like the member for St. Michael Southeast, because what it told me that our people are indeed thinking about Barbados' future 50 years down the road. And I will end with the phrase again, that national development is youth development, and youth development is national development. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first, let me thank all members who contributed to this debate. You know, the benefit of being in a great party like the Barbados Civil Party is that we encompass all voices, positive voices and negative voices, voices that approve and voices that dissent. And at the end of the day, we weigh all information and come to firm decisions at the end of it all. You know, Mr. Speaker, I don't know, maybe it is my experience as a young oral surgeon. When I think back, I lived about 14 different places. And because we were encouraged to move from place to place, hospital to hospital, so as we would get a greater experience, learning how one consultant did a procedure, or another consultant took out a tumor, did a neurological procedure, or oral surgical procedure, maxillofacial procedure, whatever it was, but we moved from place to place. 14 different places I think I would have lived over the time that I was training as an oral surgeon. But what that did for me, and I don't know for others, is it made me realize that there's no real emotional attachment to a building. And it makes me think of the church. A church is not a building, Mr. Speaker. A church is the body, the congregation. That is what a church is. So by extension, to me, a building, yes, it has some significance, but it also has a utilization. And utilization is just as important, being a pragmatic person. We cannot do it all on our own. The government cannot do it on its own. We need assistance. We need help. It's a small nation, and we need those to come and help us as best they can and to give us that assistance that they can give us. We cannot change our history, Mr. Speaker. We know our history. We know what our people went through. But what we have to do is make our future better for all of our people. Give our people opportunities. Give our people a chance to do better than we did ourselves. Help our people to see a better life than we have had to see. And build a better foundation for our people. And that is all we try to do every single day. As a government, as a party, as a nation. Isn't one person that could come here and speak emotively? We all can. We all can speak. But what we have to do is understand that our past is our past, but let us chart a better future. Let us understand that we must bring people together, bring hands together, bring resources together, and make things better for the next set of generation that follow us. And that is what our job is. Not to look at a building. Because a building has in a different person, that does not change the history of what the man that lived in it did. It could never. Because the building is not the man. I respect Errol Walton Barrow. I knew Errol Walton Barrow. He took me flying in his plane. I knew him as a boy. He shopped at my father's place. I would not do anything to disrespect a man that has shopped at my father's place. Shopped. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, sometimes the mask kerfuffles what you have to say. He shopped at my father's place. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I will give you a little story. When when I was fortunate enough to win a Barbados exhibition in 1986, Earl Walton Barr was the Prime Minister. He met me at a funeral. It was my grandfather's funeral. And at that funeral, the results had not come back as yet. But Earl Walton Barr came up to me and said, "Young man, I've known you for a long time. I can't do his voice. And congratulations are in order." And I did not understand, but I gathered what he was telling me about. And then the news came back that I had got an exhibition and so on and so forth, and I was thankful, and he winked, and, you know, I was appreciative. But it didn't finish there. When I got to England, and I went to the High Commission to report to them, as I was told to do, it was Vernon, and excuse me for using his name, Vernon Smith was the High Commissioner at that time. And Vernon Smith also said, the Prime Minister of Barbados has contacted me and told me to take very good care of you. And he didn't have to tell me that, because many days when I didn't have money, I would go to your father's store and I could get a carton of cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey. And your father wouldn't tell me anything about it. So Vernon Smith told me so in 1987 when I arrived at the High Commission in the UK. And further, he told all of the staff members there to make sure and take good care of this young man. So this opportunity to lease a building, in fact, to me, is not a disrespect, but an honor to put it back into the state that it should be in. To not leave a building in a dilapidated condition, a health risk, but instead to recognize our history, recognize our heritage, and to improve on what we have. It is no way taken away from what the man has done for this country. If it wasn't for Tom Adams, the Speaker, I would have been a member of the Democratic Party. And I will tell you that, but Rawdon Adams was in my class. And I got exposed to Tom Adams. And it's through Tom Adams that I got into the Barbados Labour Party. I remember, please forgive me for... I understand. And I will refrain from saying names.
Yes,
the former,
follow the rules, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Senator in the other House, Mr. Speaker, was in my class for 5 years. We went to the same class from 1979 to 1985 when he left Barbados. He was my friend from then till now. And I visited his house on many occasions and met with his then father, who was at the time the Prime Minister of Barbados. And he spoke to us as young 11 and 12-year-old boys. And it is from that encouraged me to be the person that I am and to join the party that I have joined and serve the party as best I can every single day. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to be clear. We have a duty and a responsibility to respect those on whose shoulders we stand on both sides. But we also have a duty and responsibility to those who will follow us. And it is on that we are doing this lease to the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Order number 3, sir. In the name of the Honorable Minister of Housing and Maintenance, move the passing of a resolution that approves the publication in the official gazette of the notification on Section 91 of the Land Acquisition Act, Chapter 228, declaring the abandonment of the compulsory acquisition of the parcel of land situate at Highsmith in the parish of St. Philip in this island.
All member Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is a very, very simple matter. It is an abandonment of what was an acquisition for 10.9 hectares of land at Harry Smith. Essentially, Mr. Speaker, the Crown had anticipated that we'd be paying $10 million for this parcel of land to be able to construct housing and also for tourism development. However, subsequent to that, the then owners put in a claim that it should in fact be $24 million and not $10 million. Bearing in mind that they've been paying land tax at around that value for a while. But that being said, Mr. Speaker, the government has made a decision that with the current pandemic situation and the cost that it has been on the economy, we have decided that 10 million or north of 10 million will be better spent trying to provide jobs and opportunities for people in Barbados other than this development at this time. So therefore, we are asking that this acquisition that was first started now be abandoned. And I would ask that this resolution to abandon this land acquisition at Harry Smith do now pass.
Honorable member for St. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not to be very long, I understand the honorable member to be saying that the original intention related to the acquisition was for purposes of housing and tourism. I would imagine that the government's perception of the need for such projects at the time would have been based on some substantial evidence that gave them persuasion that the project should be undertaken. The fact that you are having an issue with the cost seems to be the suggestion of the member for Christchurch West, the reason why you are now abandoning the attempts at this acquisition. Now, obviously the needs still exist. We're hearing that it's because of the expenditure related to the COVID situation that we're pulling back from a housing project, and housing continues to be a problem in Barbados. Now, I really don't want to be mischievous, but you're telling me you're abandoning a housing project because of the possibly inflated costs, increased costs, and you're not prepared to spend that increased cost, although it's not a settled sum. I would imagine there could have been negotiation, Mr. Speaker, you're a lawyer. But you're pulling back from that because of the expenditure that government now finds itself faced with relative to COVID. The same government that is promising the world that it will afford them free tickets to vacation in Barbados. Same government that is spending money on all kinds of other stuff, even despite the presence of the COVID threat and are having to deal with that. But you're abandoning a prospective housing project which must have been thought to be worthwhile in the first place, and in a context where the need for housing in Barbados still persists. Now, I wonder if the minister would advise us as to whether or not there were any issues relative to the acquisition apart from the moving costs. Would the property acquired or the attempt to acquire the property, did that take place in a context where there was clarity of title over the lands? The information I have that there may have been some incorrect understanding as to the title of these lands, and that the acquisition itself may have been faced with some issues as a result of lack of clarity around the title relative to the property. It would be good if we could be reminded of the owners from whom the acquisition was attempted, whether or not it was Marriott's, whether or not it was Grant's Hotel, Inc. And on that matter, Mr. Speaker, I've said and raised in here 2 or 3 times the issue of government's outstanding liability to the owners of the Sam Lords Castle property. Still to be properly informed, advised as to that, and so I raise it again. My information seems to suggest it's $50 million and plus still outstanding to the owners after all of this time. And that government is not moving with any seeming decent haste to settle that liability. So I find it difficult that you're abandoning the housing project because there may have been some upward movement in cost without negotiating further on that. You're abandoning a tourism project because you're faced with the constraints now caused by expenditure relative to COVID, and yet you offer to the world, get a free ticket and come back. We will pay that for you. And please tell us whether or not there were any issues related to the initial attempt to acquire the property, issues revolving around lack of clarity on title. And since there are all some connectivity existing here, while I'm on my feet, I'm asking again for the 3rd or 4th time to have some information with respect to government's outstanding liability to the owners, former owners of Sam Lords Castle, because I hear, I should say Sam Lords property, because I hear it's upward of $50 million, and it's taking long to come to a point of settlement with the owners with respect to that.
Honorable for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Just for clarity, of course, I can't give much information for things that haven't gone through cabinet, but needless to say, not only is the Sam Lords Castle acquisition payment gaining the significant attention and negotiation, and we're certainly in the process and very close to completion on that. But I want to go further and say that we are also looking at all acquisitions that government has made, both for road improvements, house moving, whatever it is, over the last 25, 30 years. And all of those, every single one, we've put together and we'll be taking to cabinet very shortly with a move to be able to settle all acquisitions that are outstanding. So it would be a misnomer, it would be misrepresentation for me to sit there and suggest to the honourable member for St. Michael West that we are not working on it. Yes, we are working on it. And I cannot tell you what cabinet will do, but I am definitely working on both of those matters, and we are going through the process as we speak. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that this resolution do not pass.
Questions that the aforementioned resolution do pass. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that very interesting morning, I believe we have now come to the end of today's sitting. Let me say that, this is a very historic day for all of us. It is the first time that we're meeting virtually. I know that some may have had their reservations in terms of how the process would work, but I'm glad that we have been proactive in making decisions as it relates to this pandemic, and one of those decisions has been to certainly allow Parliament to be held in this way so that the people's business can still be conducted. Let me just thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, who also would have stepped in at the time with his concerns and certainly was able to allow us to finalize plans to be able to engage in this particular way. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I move that the sitting be adjourned until the 2nd of February at 10 a.m.
Questions that this chamber stands adjourned until the 2nd day of February at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until the second day of February at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.